Hi, lovely. So this is going to be your astrology transit reading regarding your career. So let's hope this time it goes all the way through. As you can see, it's already highlighted because I did that yesterday when the videos didn't work. So let's see. So let's get started. So I have a couple, or actually 3 charts. This is your natal chart. I also looked at some transits and some progressions, which I found to be pretty relevant to your situation. So when I look at career, I focus on the midheaven as well as the midheaven ruler. The midheaven is essentially where the sun reached its zenith the day you were born, and for you it was in the cardinal air sign of Libra. So that right away tells me that you, when it comes to your career, you need human interaction. You are essentially a people person at work versus being somebody who works in a lab shut away in the dark. So, you know, even working with technology, communication, just you're more of a heady person. You need to express your ideas. So more of an intellectual person as far as that goes. And with Libra, this is definitely dealing with other people and society at large, because your ruler, your midheaven ruler, is Libra, and it is in Scorpio in the 12th house. So what this tells me is that you're here to essentially solve a problem, essentially with groups of people. There are several reasons why, because Libra is actually in fall in Scorpio, so usually it's kind of a challenging place for Libra, or I'm sorry, Venus, but when she's in a situation like this, you can really kind of help solve problems in society, specifically because it is the 12th house, and that is indicative of being of service for the greater collective. So it's interesting that you have her conjunct Pluto here, because I'm betting that whichever area you went to study in school, or what it is you're going to be doing in this lifetime, has a lot to do potentially with your upbringing. Perhaps something happened early on that kind of triggered this passion for you to kind of be of service, something that maybe you experienced now you want to kind of help solve in society. So I'd be curious to know what that Venus-Pluto conjunction is about, especially in the 12th house. So that is that, and you also have, because in quadrant house systems, the MC is usually in the 10th house. As you can see, I'm using whole signs. That is my preferred method. So you also have essentially another house that's relevant for reading as far as career goes, because that would be your 10th house of work, and that is under the sign of Virgo. So your ruler of your 10th house would be Mercury, who's down here in the 1st house conjunct your sun. So that's really interesting, because your sun is your luminary, because you do have a day chart. So all of these planets, Mercury, your sun, Venus, your midheaven, and the 10th house, any transits that affect those specific points and planets are going to be potentially triggering changes when it comes to your work. So that's kind of a lot. It's definitely, it could be quite a blessing if you're getting many great transits there, and it can also be a little challenging, but you have a lot to work with, so that's great. So let's get on with this. One thing I did want to mention before I get on to the transits, if you can see, you have Mercury 3 degrees away from the sun, so it's essentially hidden. This is combust the sun, so Mercury is essentially under the sun's beams. So he's almost wearing a cloak of invisibility. So this can work 2 ways. It can be kind of a detriment in the sense that you may not be seen, your ideas may not be heard or acknowledged or seen, because they are hidden. Another thing that is actually a positive thing about it is that you have access to a lot of wisdom and knowledge that comes from a divine source, because in ancient times the sun was considered God. It was, you know, where divine wisdom comes from. So you have this access to kind of the spiritual realm that others do not. So that's really a blessing. The other thing with that is if you ever are working in a situation where you need to be not seen, kind of like a spy or a detective, you need a good poker face with counseling and psychology, that would be a good, that would be to your favor. So that's something here to kind of look into with how both your luminary, your sun, and also Mercury, your 10th house ruler, how those are working for you. Now, let's get on to the transits, which I have here. Again, they're highlighted from yesterday. So, you know, transits to your midheaven, all these sensitive points that I mentioned, can trigger things like job changes, industry changes, and they can really kind of create a whole overhaul in your life. And especially because you have your luminary in your first house, and also the ruler of your 10th house here. This really tells me if you have any kind of triggers to your career, it's going to trigger everything else in your life, because it looks, having the luminary here and Mercury really kind of shows there's a strong connection with having to do a specific kind of work. Now, sometimes I think you're still early on in your career. I'm not entirely certain, but I kind of think you are. I honestly think that in many years to come, if you aren't already, you're going to be doing something almost like an activist, but there's just something that you're really passionate about and you're going to be working on. It's like, it seems really big because it's for society at large. This could be even with government, politics. I'm not exactly sure the extent of it and what you're like really passionate about doing. But it looks here with your sun being here that it's really important that you believe in what you do, especially as you get older. I think, you know, maybe, you know, when you're younger, you may take a job just to kind of pay the bills, but that's not going to be fulfilling to you. I really feel strongly that you are going to want to be doing something that you feel passionate about and that you strongly believe in because of that sun and Mercury in the first house. So let's get going here. So obviously the biggest transit here that you've been experiencing is your Saturn return. I can't believe how many, like Saturn right now is transiting over your second house, and your natal Saturn's at 2 degrees. Saturn right now is at 20. Actually, I'm not exactly sure where he is because this was pulled out from last week. But anyway, he's around here, and of course he's going retro, so he's going to be heading back anyway. But you essentially, even though Saturn's already far away from your natal Saturn, Saturn is making quite a few aspects to your chart. So first, let's go back to your Saturn return, which you felt the first round in January of 2018 when he was conjunct your natal Saturn. And then you got a second round in August of 14th to September 30th of 2018. And then he stationed direct exactly at 2 degrees. That's why you had that like big gap, like he kind of slowed down and then he stationed direct. So that was kind of a big hit for you. Like, it's interesting how Saturn and some of these other planets are stationing either direct or retrograde right on your natal planet degrees. It's really interesting. So I am not at all surprised that you are feeling these transits immensely. So with the Saturn return, as you know, I like to call it the responsible burden that comes into your life, because it's kind of a reality check that you're graduating into adulthood and you are being a responsible human being, and you have to decide what you're going to do with your life. So most often people kind of commit to something that's long term, like going back to school, or buying property like a house, and getting married or having children. It's kind of long-term commitment events tend to happen around a Saturn return. So that is what began for you back in January of 2018. Now, what is occurring now is that Saturn is square your midheaven over here. As you can see, here's your midheaven at 17 degrees of Libra, and Saturn is at 20 here, but it has been at 17, and it's going to be hitting it, and it has. So this is going to, because it is a square, it's going to require some kind of adjustment when it comes to your career. Saturn, like I said, is really kind of coming here to give you a reality check when it comes to your career, specifically with the midheaven. And he essentially wants you to get real when it comes to your career and your life ambitions. So usually when Saturn is making an aspect to the midheaven, it's kind of telling you, it's almost like another Saturn return for you, but specifically for your career. And it's saying, what are you going to commit to long term? And kind of creating new boundaries around it, and it having to do with really the core essence of what you set out to do. So if this is something you studied in school that you're no longer doing, or something that you kind of put on the back burner that you kind of forgot about, or you feeling like you don't have enough time for, Saturn is kind of telling you that, this is the time to get on the path of the career that you want to do in your life. So it's kind of, early on for you, but it's just like this really heavy responsibility that seems to be coming to you. So just really getting back to the core of what you set out to do. And also, he kind of asked to kind of consolidate and focus on what you want to do as well in other areas, anything that's going to be affecting your career and life purpose. So it doesn't even have to do with just the job, but what you see yourself, how you see yourself fulfilling your life purpose. So they're really big topics right now that are really kind of telling you to get down and work hard and focus on with that. Now, I'm going to tell you the dates that Saturn began to square your MC. This began in February 12th of 2019, and that went on to March 4th of 2019. Now it just went retrograde on April 30th, and so it's going to come back to square that midheaven on June 29th and through July 12th. It's going to station direct September 17th, and you're going to get one final square. So there are three more that you're two more that you're going to get. So the last one is going to be experienced on November 21st through December 1st. So these are just pretty important dates that are going to have a significant impact on your career. Now, Saturn does get a bad rap that he can be kind of limiting and oppressive, but he also brings long-term commitments. So especially if you are getting to really looking for that job or seeking employment that is meaningful for you and at the core of what you want to do, those times are really optimal, or at least times to adjust what you're doing so that you can do that. Saturn's definitely going to come around and say, hey, are you sure this is what you want to do? That sort of thing. So those are like really peak periods for that. Now, on the brighter side, we also have Saturn, who's going to sextile your MC ruler, Venus, over here in the 12th house. Now, that's a sextile, so that's a bit of a more favorable aspect. The whole thing with, even though like some aspects are considered good and others not so good. Like the square can be challenging, but it's dynamic and you can get a lot of progress out of a square. So don't be afraid of these squares. The sextile, it is definitely seen as easier, but it can also be lazy because it's so easy. But it's, you know, it's hard to be lazy with Saturn, right? But anyway, so since you are getting this sextile with Saturn to Venus, I kind of see the opportunity when Saturn hits Venus as a time where things are going to be more productive for you and not as oppressive. Like it may be easier for you to accomplish what you want when it comes to your work. And those dates are, let's see, August of 2000. Hold on, why do I have August here? Wait, yes, it's August through September. Oh, August 12th, I'm sorry. August 12th through September 7th. And then again in September 29th through December 1st. Now, as we'll see later on with your charts, this fall, beginning in September, is looking really good for you when it comes to your career. So this may be a time where you actually gain something permanent and long-term is what I'm seeing based on your transits and your progressions. So that's something to keep in mind at this point. But especially when Saturn hits that, makes that exact sextile with Venus is really important, I feel. So let's keep going. All right, so the other transits that are pretty significant, we've been having this Jupiter-Neptune square happening all year long. It's no longer an exact square, but with the planets, you know, they're still within range, but with them going retrograde, the energy is still there. However, for you, there are some pretty significant triggers that are happening. And the first thing I noticed is that Neptune over here is square your sun, okay? And what that does, and also Mercury, right? Your sun and Mercury, because they're conjunct. So this is going to be affecting your Mercury-ruled houses, which is obviously the 10th house here, and also your 7th house of relationships, right? This is also platonic relationships. It could be business, not just love affairs, not just romantic partnerships. So this is definitely something that can impact work because these are your Mercury-ruled houses that are being squared by Neptune. So what this does is it can add some confusion to where to proceed next or how to go about things. It can be very disorienting when it comes to work and your personal affairs. So if you're kind of feeling like you're in limbo, that is good old Neptune over here causing that. Now, the thing with the key dates when Neptune squared Mercury in particular were at the end of May of 2018. Now, check this out. All of June 2018, Neptune was at an exact square with your natal Mercury. And it stationed retrograde on June 18th, right at 16 degrees, your natal Mercury. So that was a really significant month for you, June of 2018. Something definitely, you know, I think you experienced something with work in June, if I recall. And that is something, you know, Mercury kind of tends to come and dissolve things, but it's not always a bad thing, even though it may feel like it at that time, because Neptune kind of comes in and, you know, even though it's disoriented and it fizzles things away, usually it's doing that to prepare you to get into a more authentic space. So things can fall apart. So June 2018, very significant, squaring your natal Mercury, definitely adding some confusion, some disillusionment, some things may be falling apart. You can thank Neptune for that, but again, it's not all bad. Now, it squared your natal Mercury again in March of 2019 through March of March 3rd, I cannot talk, of 2019 to March 29th. And right now it's actually at 17 degrees. So it's really only 1 degree away from an exact square. That's pretty significant. You're still feeling that. I mean, that is a very disorienting kind of energy. And it's actually going to go back to 16 degrees in September 22nd into the beginning of January 220, just because of the retrograde periods. It's going to kind of be going back and forth. So again, the thing with Mercury, even Neptune, even though it may be causing a little bit of chaos here with work, Neptune, it brings kind of that fog of confusion because you can't see your way out of a Neptune transit. Neptune really asks you to feel your way out. So Neptune is when he's having all of these aspects, especially to your Sun and Mercury. This is actually a really good time for you to develop more of your intuitive abilities, your creative side. It's not so great for logical things in life, you know, and so I can understand if you're looking for work, that's probably not very productive, but you can use its energies for other things, so keep that in mind. Now the good news is that Jupiter will be conjunct your natal Mercury, and this is a really good thing just because Jupiter tends to amplify things. He kind of brings blessings and gifts, so this can be a really good thing for you. Now let's see, he is going to be conjunct your natal Mercury on July 2nd of 2019 through July 10th while it's going retrograde. And then it will go direct and be conjunct again in September 13th of 21st. So there's that September month again. I have a good feeling about September. With everything that happens to be. So September seems to be a hot month for you, beginning with Jupiter making a conjunction with Mercury, because he is, again, the ruler of your 10th house. So keep those dates in mind, September 13th through 21st, if there's like an opportunity to apply to a job that you feel is more in alignment with what you want to do, those would be some great times to do it, just because Jupiter is going to help you to be seen and kind of give you some blessings in that department. Great time for relationships. Again, your 10th house and your 7th house are going to be highlighted at that time in September because of this Jupiter conjunction. So really look for that. This could really be the time when you get that job offer that leads to that long-term job security. So that is going to be really good. One last thing I did want to mention, there's a couple actually. This Uranus transiting into Taurus is kind of going to begin to have quite an effect here for you. You have you have your moon, Pluto, and again Venus in Scorpio, and so Uranus is opposing them. That's going to be huge with your moon in there. So if you're experiencing kind of things are kind of being shaken up for you, especially how your security, your sense of stability, Uranus is kind of doing that on purpose. And the thing is that Uranus comes in to kind of get you into operating from a place of more authenticity. So how we were talking about Neptune dissolving things that aren't essentially for your highest good, Uranus is going to get in there and even shake them up even more. So anything that you feel that has been a loss, if you just feel like your feet are not on firm ground, that is normal, especially because you have Uranus opposing your natal moon. That is huge. So that's going to be happening for a while. I feel like you're going to be going through a lot of soul searching and things are going to be kind of chaotic for a bit. But the good news is that once this transit is over, and once it's not hitting exactly any of your planets, it's going to bring a new sense of freedom for you. And this is going to be personal freedom for you. And also it's going to be for your career. So these are some actually exciting times that are happening for you. Now let's move on to some of your progressions. So one thing that I noticed, there are a couple of things here. Your moon is at 9 degrees, actually it's already at 10 degrees, of Sagittarius, your progressed moon. So what this tells me is that about 10 months ago, it was in Scorpio. Usually the moon is in, the progressed moon is in a sign for about 2.5 years. A Scorpio progression is really intense. You know about Scorpio, you know, sometimes I kind of call it the rising phoenix progression, just because you really shed a lot. Many times we shed people, we experience loss, whether it's, you know, people who pass on, sometimes partners. We tend to, you know, just kind of shed people from our lives that, you know, it's kind of sad, but it also ends up being a blessing, only because we are being encouraged to kind of get a new sense of freedom, shed baggage we've been holding on to. So it's kind of a time to start over. So we do tend to shed a lot during a Scorpio progression. It can be kind of hard emotionally. And so once we get into Sagittarius, we are able to spread our wings and go, and it doesn't feel as oppressive. You know, in Scorpio, you're more like introverted, you don't want to be social. And then when you get into the Sag progression, you're more extroverted and you feel like, you know, really getting out there, taking more risks, and there's a sense of more freedom there. However, what I have noticed is when you first come into this Sag progression, you still tend to lose some things here, which is really interesting. It's like the shedding continues, the last things. People sometimes lose significant others, jobs. There's just still this like continuing shedding that happens, but it's all leading you to a new place. It's kind of pushing you away from your comfort zone. And so, you know, Scorpio, sometimes we lose so much already, or we experience so much, it can leave us a bit cynical that we then don't want to step out into, we don't want to take any risk because we're kind of shell-shocked. With Sag, it tells you, no, you are not going to be in any state of comfort right now. You need to go and get out there and discover new things. Life is waiting for you. So that can happen. So the thing is that the moon is going to, the progressed moon, what's significant, is going to be conjunct your natal sun. And this is going to be also in the fall, because let's see, we're in May already. Oh my God, May, June, July, August. So in about August, September, it's going to be hitting your natal sun. So this into September, let's see, August, September, October, around those months, so fall again, you know, the moon is going to be hitting the sun and your Mercury. That's a big deal. So that again, you know, that's going to highlight your 10th house of work as well of relationships. So that usually, when I see that, I kind of see an indication of when the moon, the progressed moon, hits a natal planet, it kind of brings the spotlight onto those planets. And so where those planets rule, that is what's going to be highlighted, and you're going to get that attention. So that is very promising. I really like that as far as getting employment. Very, very exciting. So again, September seems to be kind of a hot month for you. What else did I see here that I wanted to say? Oh, one really, really cool thing. Your progressed ascendant is about to, in about a year, it is going to progress into Aquarius. So now, you know, right now your rising sign for the past like 30 years has been in Capricorn, and it is going to be moving into Aquarius. Now, this is huge because your ascendant when you were born was at 29 degrees of Sagittarius, so that's why you've already had one whole change. These are permanent changes. Most people, like I said, it takes about about 30 years to move through a house. So when the ascendant, when an angle changes into another sign, this changes everything. Everything that you once, everything from what you desire to what you need, everything changes. So going from from Capricorn here, which is cardinal, I don't think it's going to be as huge of a shift because they're both ruled by Saturn. So it's going to go from Capricorn into Aquarius. You're going to be going from this earthy sign to an air sign, which is going to be actually a little more extroverted, but also, it's still going to want that stability and structure, but not as, how can I put it, as strict as Capricorn would want it, not as serious. It's going to definitely be open to more revolutionary ways of doing things. So it's going to change. It's going to just kind of change your flavor of everything. So I would be interested to see what happens here. I just see a lot of changes. Things are just not going to be felt the same once that ascendant changes modes and signs. So that is really interesting. So there's definitely going to be kind of even a desire to slow down and stabilize in a different way, not in a Capricorn way, if that makes sense. So, and I think this is going to even impact your career, just because it is going to be more with interacting even with larger groups of people. So I'm just so curious about your career, where you're going to be heading with that. I just see you working with large groups of people, or even representing like groups of people. So there's just a lot of important work that you're here to do. And the last thing, a couple of last things that I wanted to mention really quick. I just quickly looked at your solar return chart, and your Time Lord this year is Jupiter. So Jupiter is playing a prominent role for you this year, and I think actually next year it's going to be as well. So that's what that means essentially, is that Jupiter transits are going to be especially important for you. So going back to your transit here, when Jupiter hits that natal Mercury again, that is going to be the time that you want to work your magic, like get your intentions out there. I would even recommend starting almost like a devotional practice to Jupiter on Thursdays. Start, doing some offerings, just acknowledge, try to get essentially his assistance to help you with your work. And Jupiter, his ruling angel, if you work with angels, is Archangel Zadkiel. So that is an angel that you could work with to kind of help you with your career. That is an important one for you. So that is one key thing I wanted to mention. The other thing is we're about to have a new moon, and it's going to be at 14 degrees of Taurus. So that is going to be an exact opposition to your Venus. So that's also a big deal for you. So this new moon, I would really